Yo, what's going on guys, Arekkz here and welcome back to another Division video. Now the guys over at Massive just released another new Division podcast, and if you guys have seen my videos on the previous ones, you know that typically during the podcast they tend to have a Q&A section, which invariably includes a few nuggets of information. However, this week's episode was packed full of loads of really cool information, so that means I'm here to tell you guys exactly what you need to know and give you a complete rundown. Of course, if you guys do want to check out the full podcast for yourself, and I definitely recommend that you do, I will leave a link to it in the description box down below. Make sure that if you do have a SoundCloud account, you go and follow that podcast, give it some support, hit that like button, all that good stuff, because it is a really cool thing. It's a really great source of information, and ultimately, until the game comes out, it's the lifeblood of some of these videos. Anyway, with that being said, let's get started. So, the podcast begins by kind of setting the scene and basically asking the question that say, when you're a brand new player, jumping in for the first time, what do you want to do? And ultimately, you know, it's a shooter, but it's also an RPG. That means you need to find a weapon that suits your playstyle, but you also want the best gear possible to boost your stats. And the different gear that's available is of course there to boost different elements of that. So for example, one of these situations they spoke about was, say, if you were a fan of pistols and you like, say, using the ballistic shield with the pistol, you might be on the lookout for gear that supports that playstyle. Things that maybe boost pistol damage, things that, say, reduce skill cooldown so that when you lose your shield you can then use another one instantly straight after. Things like that. You basically want these sort of synergies that kind of go hand in hand. And this is of course where the shooter and the RPG segments combine, because you'll find that weapon damage isn't just tied to the weapon itself. Weapon damage also comes from your gear. They said that typically about 60% of your damage comes from your gun and the rest is from your gear. So you can, as you kind of progress through the game, as you level up, as you find better gear, you can enhance the weapons you have. Which means when you first acquire a weapon, the stats you see there and then are not necessarily the stats you have, say, 10 levels down the line or, you know, at the end of the game. So there is of course a big emphasis on finding both the best weapons and also the gear to complement said weapon. On top of that, the items you find throughout the game have both levels and also quality or rarity, and this determines how many bonuses they'll have. Basic items typically have, say, 1 bonus, whereas when you find things like legendary items, they may have 2 or 3. And when you get to the max level, you want to be searching for orange or legendary gear. You do need to be a certain level to start finding that gear, and of course that's how kind of like the in-game progression works. You know, at the beginning you'll start encountering white and green items, and as you progress you'll encounter blue, purple, and then of course orange, which is the legendary gear. And that is kind of where the end game comes in, because ultimately as an end game agent you want to be decked out in all legendary gear. This will not only give you the most bonuses, but also the most attributes. And attributes is a brand new system on top of this. See, your character has 3 main attributes: firearms, stamina, and electronics. And these do different things. Firearms will passively increase the overall damage you do with weapons, stamina increases your health, and electronics improves your skill power. So the more power you have, the better your skills. For example, something like, say, pulse would pulse for both longer and further, your shield would, say, take more damage before it gets destroyed, or the seeker mine may, say, deal more damage once it explodes. However, on top of this, and this is where some of the end game stuff comes in, weapons also have unlockable abilities and talents. For example, it could be something like a big boost to your critical hit damage, or shooting an enemy in the head could result in, say, health regeneration for a short period of time, something like that. However, in order to unlock those special skills or talents, you need to have a certain level in your attributes. So for example, one might require that you have X number of points in stamina, while another might require X points in firearms, etc. So when you really get to endgame optimization and the whole kind of min-maxing game, you're not only going to be searching for the best legendary or orange gear, but you're also going to be working hard to try and distribute your attribute points so that you can unlock every skill on your weapons. Once you have all of that, you'll be a pretty fierce force to be reckoned with. And this is super promising. This is one of the first genuine glimpses we've had at some of Division's end game, the sort of gear min-maxing game, and this is often what keeps people coming back. The pursuit for that perfect piece of gear with that perfect role that perfectly complements your set and playstyle, searching for this is what will keep you coming back. And in order to get the best stuff, you need to level up, because at the start of the game, as mentioned, you'll only have access to, say, basic items like white and green, and these items don't typically have those special skills. So the more you progress, the more the system presents itself, and of course the closer you get to the end game min-maxing system. Blue items are the first time you'll actually see these skills, then purple and orange are of course the more potent, more powerful versions. Do bear in mind of course that this colour grading system only applies to stat-based gear, so vanity gear is completely separate, and while some of the items may be harder to find, they don't actually affect your stats, and then therefore they don't actually have any kind of rarities or colour grading system. So, as a super quick recap, just before I move on to the Q&A section, in case all those kind of like terms and jargon got a little bit confusing, basically it works like this. You have 3 main attributes: firearms, stamina, and electronics, and these attributes can be increased by equipping different pieces of gear. gear will not only increase your attributes, but they will also offer you bonuses. Bonuses are of course things that are active the second you have your gear, so again, be that things like reduced recoil, reduced threat, maybe sort of increased critical damage, things like that. And on top of that, you also have talents or abilities that are tied to those weapons, but those talents or abilities are only unlocked when you have certain attribute values. So again, for example, one of the special perks, one of the more like exotic ones that might be something like, you know, regenerating health from shooting someone in the head. Again, this requires you have certain attribute points. So as you can see, the whole kind of like end game gear system is sort of like a puzzle. You know, you have to find the right piece of gear that not only carries the stats you need and also the perks you need, but also correctly distributes your attributes so that you can in turn unlock those skills. Pretty complicated stuff, but also pretty exciting. That is a super in-depth gear system that is kind of unlike something I've seen before, so it's definitely something that's going to keep me coming back. And obviously that kind of pursuit to have the best endgame gear, the best kind of endgame setup, the best kind of endgame loadout is going to be really exciting and probably also quite frustrating if you're trying to find that perfect piece. Either way, let's move on to the Q&A. So, a few questions from some of the community members, again brought about some interesting talking points. So first of all, backpacks, how do they work? Basically, gear has themes. Vests are considered more protective, knee pads are more survival, and backpacks are skill-based. They'll feature skill bonuses, and their focus is to boost everything to do with skills. And if you look closely, you can also see on someone's backpack what skills they have equipped. So this is a great tip for the Dark Zone, because if you're going to go and pick a fight with someone, you might want to look at them first, because then you'll work out whether, say, they've got a turret, or whether they've got maybe like a seeker mine, or something like that. The next question asked about contamination levels and how that all works with gas masks. Basically, located around the world are these contaminated zones, and they're not just inside the Dark Zone, some of them are also located outside, and in order to enter them, you'll require a certain level of gas mask, which in turn contains a certain number of filters. All masks by default have one filter, so you can enter the most basic contaminated zones, but if you try and enter a zone that is too contaminated for your gear, then you'll have a 10-second timer before you get contaminated and you then die. So again, the higher your level, the better the gear, the more stuff you can access, and ultimately this will lead to better stuff. Then a quick question about Dark Zone loot and how it differs from regular loot, and basically this is sort of something we already knew, but the long and short of it is the enemies in the Dark Zone are tougher, and therefore the chance of finding better gear in the Dark Zone is of course that much higher. Quick question after that, does gear need to be repaired? And the answer is no, there's no kind of like, you know, degrading or repairing system in place. Basically when you get gear, it's good for life. Moving on to med packs and grenades, the question was, do they have cooldowns? And they said that right now they're actually working on that exact thing. As they currently stand, there is no cooldown in place, but what they have been testing right now for med packs is this system whereby when you first use a med pack, it'll give you a short boost of health, but then it will also give you kind of temporary health regeneration over, say, a short period of time, which will then, you know, fill up the rest of your health. But if you get shot during this time, it will of course cancel that regeneration. So it's kind of like a way to sort of, you know, balance it out, because it stops people from, say, running into combat and just, you know, spamming health packs and keeping themselves alive. Just trying to sort of like work out the best balance thing for that. But of course, as mentioned, this is something they are working on, so expect that to, you know, change or tweak slightly nearer to launch. Finally, can we change the appearance of each weapon? And again, this is something we've seen slightly before, but the answer is yes. Weapons have mod slots and also have skin slots. You can find and unlock weapon skins, and of course you can use them to change the colour and the appearance of your weapon. But of course, also when you're applying mods, be that, you know, scopes, silencers, magazines, etc., they will also change the look of your weapon. And that is pretty much it. Now, one final point, it is important to note that while all the skills do enhance your character, ultimately player skill will still be the most important factor. Having all legendary gear doesn't necessarily mean that a lower leveled, lesser geared player won't be able to kill you, so don't go thinking it's all about gear. Of course, having that good end game gear setup is extremely important, but player skill is still the predominant factor. Anyway, that is pretty much it, so hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Again, if you guys do want to listen to the podcast for yourself, and I do recommend you do so, then you can find a link to that in the description box down below. But aside from that, let me know in the comments down below what you guys think of all this system. I'm definitely super excited about this whole kind of gear min-maxing system. I think there's definitely a lot of scope to keep you busy endgame for that, so let me know if that's something that interests you guys. But aside from that, thank you very much for watching, take it easy, catch you next time, peace out.